Okay, we are day 35 into hatching. And I wanted to take some time to explain hatching to you guys. We have day 35 of hatching. Now, hatching is the most dangerous part of incubating for the chicks and the ducklings in this case. And so it's not uncommon to lose a lot of birds and a lot of babies while they're trying to hatch. And today we're going to explain why. So what ends up happening when they're hatching is we have this egg, right? And over the course of incubation, there's this egg sac at the bottom. And this egg sac gets bigger and bigger as incubation goes. This is why it's important to have the right humidity level, because the humidity is what determines the size of the egg sac. And then as time goes on, that's a little large. You're going to get kind of the secondary, like, see-through area. This is like blood cells will be in this area. And then all of this dark spot is the baby. And this area takes up about half, this membrane translucent area, and then the transparent egg sac ends up taking about half by the time the babies get out to hatch. So this section is the open area where the baby's going to rotate around so that they are facing beak towards the air cell. So when they actually are going to hatch, we have this like transparent area and then this actual egg sac, and then the baby is here, and then they're going to rotate around in the shell, and this is where you see them moving around so that their beak, their little head and their beak is there. And it's facing the air sac. So the first thing that the baby's going to do is they're going to pierce this air sac. What this does is this little air sac here provides them the air that they need to breathe for the next 24 to 48 hours. You will find that there is a lot of hurry up and wait in egg hatching and a lot of resting for the babies. So this, when they pierce this air sac in here, is called the internal pip. So this is an internal pip. You may never see an internal pip. I have seen them before because sometimes they will pip internally before you go into lockdown, and when I have done my pre-lockdown candling, I can see the little beaks in the air bubble, in the little air sac. If everything is like moving along in the correct order and in the correct timeline, you won't really see the internal pip because that will happen when they're in lockdown and you're not candling in lockdown. So this is the internal pip. After the internal pip, they're going to do what we generally refer to as the pip. It's the external pip. Now, once they do the internal pip, they're going to rest for a little while, and that can be anywhere from a few hours all the way to 48 hours. They may rest for a full 2 days between the internal pip and the external pip. Okay. So, we have the internal pip, which can take up to 48 hours between the internal and the external pip, right? So then we have the external pip. So again, we have our egg, we have our egg sac, we have the baby, we have the little baby head, The baby's got his little beak, and he's breathing air at this point. Then they're going to go ahead and use what we call an egg tooth. So, when a baby is first born, I don't know if I'm going to be able to draw this. If you look at the very tip of their beak, they have a teeny tiny little point at the end of their beak, and they use that to break the shell. So, in this case, my eggs are laying sideways. Wow. And so, I don't know, guys. I don't know how to draw sideways. Here's baby. Here's the beak. And then baby's going to pip somewhere here, or here, or here, or on this side, as we've seen. And you're going to get this teeny tiny little circle that has just these cracks in it, right? And that's from the beak pushing the beak or the bill pushing outwards on the egg, and it makes a little hole in the egg. At this point, that hole starts to let more air in so they can continue to breathe. And this is what we generally just call a pip. More specifically, it's an external pip, but we'll just call it a pip. So, we have our internal pip that does the air sac, and up to 48 hours later, we have the external pip. Then they're going to start doing what we call zippering. And the process between pipping and zippering can again take 24 to 48 hours. Because this is a lot of work. These little babies have never done this much work in their entire lives. This is a lot of effort for them. So they're going to rest. So they could rest again up to 48 hours between the external pipping and the beginning of zippering. So in this 48 hours between the pip and the zippering happens, what the baby's actually doing is absorbing the rest of their yolk. And so gosh, maybe I'll have to crack an egg one of these days and show you guys. But when you crack an egg, you have the yolk in the middle, right? And this is all the nutrients that is going to feed your baby, that is going to feed that baby duck. And so the yolk is feeding the baby throughout. When the baby does the external pip and then is waiting to start zippering, what they're doing is absorbing the rest of the yolk and detaching all of... So I said there's a bunch of blood vessels in this. This whole thing is covered in blood vessels. And so part of that zippering is detaching these blood vessels and absorbing the rest of the yolk, which is also why they don't need to eat for 48 hours. If you try and go in and help a baby hatch before they've absorbed and detached, before they've absorbed all of their yolk and detached all of their blood vessels, you can make the baby bleed out by ripping the blood vessels that have not separated from the egg yet. So then they start zippering. And I'm going to do an upside down egg this time. So we have our pip there, and they're going to start breaking the egg open all the way around the back side of the egg until they hit this. This process can take 48 hours. So we've got from internal pip to external pip, we have 48 hours. From pipping to zippering, we have 48 hours. And zippering can take 48 hours to do. So then once they zipper, they're able to kind of just push the top off. And this is why we have these like images of these little eggs that are like doot, 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 doot. And then you have them up here and they're like doot, 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 right? That's why. This is the zipper. Zip. This is what the zippering does. You see what I'm saying? So then they have to get out. And that's a whole nother process. And they can do that as long as they need to. Once a baby is hatched, it can go 48 hours without eating. So between hatching to eating can be up to 48 hours. And this is because these babies all are born at different times. And so when the mom, in like nature and the wild and stuff, hatching will happen over the course of a few days. Obviously, it's not immediate. So if the hatching process starts and baby number 1 is hatched, mom can't get up. Mom has to stay on the nest, just like they have to stay in the incubator until all the babies are hatched. So she'll stay on the nest for a couple days. And those babies don't get to eat because they're not going to go eat without their mom. And obviously these aren't nursing animals. They don't nurse like mammals do. So they can go 48 hours from hatching to needing to eat. And what they're living off of is the remainder of the yolk. So, if we look at this, the actual process of hatching can take from the internal pip, you have 48 hours, there's 2 days. From the internal pip to the external pip, you have 2 days. From the external pip to the zippering, you have 2 days. And then the actual process of zippering can take another 2 days. So you could theoretically have a baby that takes 6 days to hatch. That's very rare. I don't think I've ever seen a baby take that much time to hatch. I've seen literally from like external pip to hatched in less than 24 hours, right? It can happen very fast, but it can theoretically take up to 6 days, which is why it's important that you don't rush it. And like I said, it's important that you don't get too like trigger happy and want to jump in and start trying to help them hatch because you think they're stuck. They're just not ready, and then you might hurt them and cause them to bleed out. And then once they've hatched, they can sit in there for 2 whole days. I'll just leave them in the incubator. So if one hatches, like we have one that's pipped now, theoretically, he could be out of the egg tomorrow morning. I don't think so, but he could be. And I'm going to leave him there. I'm going to leave him there for probably a few days while his other siblings hatch. Before I try and move him. This is why hatching takes so long. This is also why this is the part where you lose the most babies. Because they have to first break that air cell. And if they can't break it, if the membrane is too strong in there, or if they don't have an egg tooth, they're not going to be able to break the membrane, they will die here. Then they have to pip externally. And again, if the egg is very strong, and I have very strong eggs, they're hard to crack compared to store eggs. My eggs are pretty hard to crack. If they can't get through the shell, they will just die here. And then if they're not able to zipper for whatever reason, if they're too tired, they're not strong enough, it takes a lot of work to break through these shells, they will die here. And then if they don't absorb all the blood cells in the egg sac and the yolk sac correctly, they might die before they get to food and water. So that's why this is the most perilous point of their incubation process. So I hope that kind of clears up why it takes so long and what's happening while in there. Anyway, I think it's kind of neat. So hopefully we will have babies soon.